In this video, I'm going to cover different ways of accessing the DOM object, document object model. So in order to be able to add an event to an HTML element, we should be able to access them first. So in this video, I'm going to cover different ways of accessing those elements. As you can see, I have created a few elements here. I have a div tag with the ID box1, class box2. Another one I use data-id10. I have a div tags that has a name attribute, first name, and input name, first name as well. Right. So I just run all these codes in the console and we'll go from there. So the very first thing is I need to access the very first element. In this case, if you look at the div on line 9, ID attribute identifies that element. So one of the things that most of us have used probably many times is getting the element by its ID. So in this case, if I go and put the box1, I simply can receive the box1. Keep in mind, as soon as you run this code, it returns an object, and that object is a div tag in line 9. So I can simply go ahead and access any element attributes that I have right now selected. So in this case, I can even go and write some information to it if I need to. So I can go ahead and say inner HTML is equal test. So I simply change the value box1 to test, right? So this is a very common way of accessing the elements, but there's some other ways of doing it too. Another one is, beside the ID, I can access the element by the class name that it uses. So I can simply go ahead, document.get element by class name. Now, the class name that I have is box2. Of course, you don't need to specify the dot because it already indicates that it's going to look for the attribute using the class. So I just have to put the class name in there. So in this case, I just go ahead and then do box2. Now what you have to realize is there are more than one element that can use the same class. That's why when I call this method, it simply returns an HTML collection of type array. So meaning it can be more than one element that uses that class. So of course, if this is a collection, I can simply go ahead and select each of the elements that I need. And of course, I can go ahead and click and select its attribute as well. So dot, in this case, if I want to go and say, give me the class name, I can simply see what is the class that this attribute has used, right? And I can get class list, which returns me all the classes this one attribute has used. So just keep in mind that you can assign multiple classes to the same element. Okay, so now that we have done that, the other one I want to show you is get element by tag name, or let's go by tag name. So I'll go ahead and simply go here, document.get element by tag name, and I simply put a div tag in this case. So if I do this, as you can see, I'm looking for more than one element. So this should return an HTML collection, right? So that's what it does. And of course, I can go ahead and select any of these elements I need. Of course, I can go ahead and loop through all those elements because they are an array. In all these elements are in an array. Okay. So tag name we've covered too. Another one I wanted to cover is document.get element by name. By name. So as you can see, there are two elements in my document that uses the name. So I'm going to look for that name, first name. Simply again, it returns a node list this time. So there are two HTML element in this array. So if I go ahead and do the first one, I can select the first one, or I can select the second one, right? Of course, if I do this, remember, I still can access their attribute as well. Okay. Now, being able to select these elements help us down the road to assign different events to each of these elements. So one of the very nice selector that I want to introduce is document.query selector. So if I go here, document.query selector. So with this one, I hope you remember everything about CSS selectors, right? So whatever you can't write in CSS selector, you can put it in the query selector, and it will select you the element based on that selector. So in this case, I want to select the first div tag, which uses the box1 ID. Just with the selector, as you write in CSS the full selector, you have to write the full selector here. So this is, I'm saying I'm looking for an element that uses ID box1, right? So simply it will return the entire div tag that uses that ID. Remember, exact same thing as CSS. So I can go here and say div pound sign box1, right? If I want to get a class, I simply go ahead. This time I have to put what? Box2. So it gives me box2. So there's so many ways of dealing with this information as well. And let me do another one. I want to go ahead and select div. So one of the selector can be a tag itself, right? When I hit enter, I just get the first one, because query selector can select only one element, and that will be the top element. In case if you want to select all the elements, you have to go and change the query to selector to query selector all. Then it's going to send you an array, which you can again go ahead and select any of these elements by referencing its index like that, right? We also can go ahead and do another document query selector. I want to show you document query selector. I want to go ahead and select by attribute this time. So if I go ahead and say, okay, you know what, I'm looking for an element that uses data dash ID attribute, right? So if I do this, of course I have to put a single quote around this. And if I do that, I can get the div tag that contains this. So I can go ahead and say, I'm looking for an input box that uses the attribute name, right? Or attribute class, or whatever is your selector. So simply that can select the information for you. Now that we know how to select the element, in the next video, we will learn how we can apply those events to these objects.